Tapakaya Jadharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Tapakaya Jadharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishna Yate Nama Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritangamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us bow down to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Sri Ramakrishna said, discrimination and renunciation are the purifying agent to purify the muddy waters of worldliness. We have discussed about discrimination, how it is very important in spiritual life. Equally important is renunciation. When discrimination and renunciation are followed, then the whole mind is turned towards God, the Supreme Divine. So, while discussing the subject renunciation, I have talked about how to prepare ourselves to go inward, to be alone. That is the first step, preliminary step, to be followed for practicing renunciation effectively. Turning the whole mind to God, to the Divine Supreme, is the fruit of renunciation. One has to be honest to make progress in one's spiritual life. It is not enough to be honest while dealing with others. You have got to be honest while dealing with your own self too. how far you are able to deal with yourself honestly. That's very important. You must have the courage to face your own weaknesses, your own failures, your own lapses. When you are able to recognize your own weaknesses, that shows you are really honest. Accept yourself as you are. Self-acceptance is a first step in spiritual life. As you keep on practicing spiritual exercises, you will find that your realization of your aloneness in this vast universe sparks off the spirit of detachment. As it grows in intensity, it cuts off from the conventional stream of life. Your life becomes different. No more can you revel and find pleasure in worldly frivolities. All that the world holds dear loses its value for you. You feel as if you are being uprooted from the world. You see around you many, many people firmly rooted in the world. However delusive the security, you see that they do somehow feel secure in it. But your roots in the world, you find, are being cut off by the acts of detachment. It is very important to come to God. As Lord Krishna says in the Gita, Ashvattamenam suvirudhamulam asangashastrena dhidena chitva. That the world tree is firm-rooted and can be cut only with the strong acts of detachment. How can you hope to live without roots? You invariably go in search of another set of roots. You are no more interested in worldly way of life. As I said, you have been uprooted from that sort of life. Now you need some roots so that you can thrive upon in the new life. So, you invariably go in search of another set of roots. Thus, renunciation automatically takes you to the next step, the search for new roots. Every religion deals basically with three entities: God, the world, and the individual. It defines how these three are related to each other and what the purpose of creation and the goal of individual are. All these things are defined in all the religions. The fundamental problem in life is avidya, ignorance. Ignorance of the true nature of our relationship with God and the world. What makes the problem more complicated is that we are not only ignorant but have also forged a kind of distorted relationship with God and with the world. It is this distortion Vedanta calls it vikshepa, that is responsible for our wrong orientation toward the supreme reality or God and toward the world around us. The spirit of renunciation signifies the beginning of awareness that something is wrong somewhere. You intuitively sense that the kind of life you lived so far was too shallow, was too superficial. You realize that the kind of relationship you have with the world, that is, with all the beings and things in it, is inadequate. You reject it. You just snap it off. That is renunciation. What remains? God. You realize that if your search for roots is to become fruitful, you have to go in search of God. What does this search mean? God is certainly not hiding anywhere up above the clouds, that you and I need to go and search Him out. All that search implies here is discovery. You are already related to God. Just discover what that relationship is and you have found your roots. There exists an eternal relationship between you and God. Swami Vivekananda defines religion as the eternal relation between the eternal soul and eternal God. Once you have detached yourself from all worldly values, all that you have to do is to discover what this eternal relationship is. The Vedanta teachers say that to know what this relation is, you have first got to know who you are. Only then can you, the real you, go forth in search of your roots. When the fire of renunciation begins to rage within you, it may apparently seem that you are detaching yourself from persons and things belonging to the world outside. You have no more connections with them and you don't like to have any connections with them. But the truth is that the real detachment is occurring somewhere nearer than is immediately obvious. Your detachment from the world is directly proportional to your detachment from your body and mind. It is your identification with your body and mind that is the source of all attachment. It's only when this identification goes away, or is at least considerably weakened, that renunciation becomes natural, spontaneous. Vedanta says that the real you is different from your body and from your mind. To know that you are different from your body is not too difficult. None of us is dumb enough to imagine that the body is going to last eternally. Everybody knows body goes away. It dies someday or other. You know for certain that whether your body lies in a coffin several feet underground or is reduced to a heap of ashes at the cremation ground, you are going to live on. So at least intellectually, you know you are different from your body. What is more difficult is to know that you are also different from your mind. Mere reasoning in this case is not sufficient because the faculty of reason is itself a part of your mind. Obviously, perfect awareness of your being someone different from both body and mind is not the result of an intellectual exercise, but of a supersensuous experience. Spiritual masters say that this is the first spiritual experience the renunciate gets, the experience of his true inner self, which is called Pratyagatman. In Sanskrit it is called Pratyagatman, which is effulgent, which is pure, which is completely different from body and mind. This experience comes as a result of disciplined life of purity. Called brahmacharya, continence. Secondly, burning spiritual aspiration, vyakulata, intense longing. And thirdly, intense prayer, prarthana. Brahmacharya, vyakulata, prarthana. It is only now, when you have got hold of the real you, your true self, it's called Jivatman in Sanskrit, that you go forth in search of the Supreme Self, which is called Paramatman. One is Jivatman, another is Paramatman. Jivatman is the embodied soul, Paramatman is the Supreme Soul. This is a special kind of going forth. It's called, again in Sanskrit, Pravrajan. Pravrajan. It is, the meaning of it is wandering inward. When the awakened inner self goes in search of the Supreme Self, it is a search, a diligent search for higher consciousness, which culminates in discovering the eternal relation that exists between the reality in you and the reality behind all creation. Advaita Vedanta, that is the non-dual philosophy, maintains that in the course of your inner wandering, you may discover different stages or levels of relationship, but your wandering stops, or rather, it reaches a point where there is no beyond. When you discover that the relation is really one of identity, only then does the significance of the great Vedantic truths become clear. What are the great Vedantic truths every Upanishad declares? One is Tattvamasi, thou art that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Prajnanam Brahma, Brahman is consciousness. I am Atma, Brahma. The self is Brahman. These are the most sacred statements declared by the Upanishads in the Vedas. When Pravrajan reaches its fulfillment, you will experience the highest truth. Swami Vivekananda says in his complete works, once your roots are discovered, once you have realized the eternal relation between the eternal soul and eternal God, the scene begins to shift. You are now ready to embrace what you had renounced earlier. All the apparent contradictions stand resolved. In that state, says Vivekananda, all difficulties vanish. All the perplexities of the heart are smoothened. All delusion disappears. Maya, instead of being a horrible, hopeless dream, becomes beautiful, and this earth, instead of being a prison house, becomes a playground. Dangers and difficulties, even all sufferings, become deified and show us their real nature. They show us that behind everything, as the substance of everything, He is standing, and that He is the one real self. Your realization of being alone reaches its logical fulfillment. The flight of the alone to the alone is over. When the alone remains, you are alone but not lonely, because you are not separated from anyone or anything. You are alone only because there is no other, and whatever other there appears to be is none but you yourself. It's a grand, blissful state. You began the spiritual quest by renouncing, by negating, by separating. You now end it by embracing, by affirming, by unifying. Sri Ramakrishna describes this situation in the Gospel. Sri Ramakrishna says, first of all, you must discriminate following the method of neti, not this, not this. He is not the five elements, nor the sense organs, nor the mind, nor the intelligence, nor the ego. He is beyond all these cosmic principles. You want to climb to the roof, then you must eliminate and leave behind all the steps one by one. The steps are by no means the roof. But after reaching the roof, you find that the steps are made of the same materials, brick, lime and brick dust, as the roof. It is the Supreme Brahman that has become the universe and its living beings and the 24 cosmic principles. That which is Atman has become the five elements. The realization of absolute freedom, which we call mukti, is the one goal of spiritual life. Freedom, freedom, freedom. That's the cry of every soul. While the world, blindfolded by the veil of petty desires and passions, unconsciously searches for freedom in wrong places and in wrong ways, whereas a spiritual aspirant does it consciously in a right place and in a right way, guided as he is by his Guru, scriptures, and his own awakened power of spiritual intuition. So, the man who is following the path of spirituality must always be armed with discrimination and renunciation. Not yielding to any weaknesses, but to face them courageously and rise up and stand up. Even if you die in the attempt, it doesn't matter. Nothing is lost. You have had a heroic death because you are meeting with death in search of immortality. Wonderful death it is. Never be afraid of anything. Never be afraid of anything. Abhi, abhi, be fearless. That is the most important qualification necessary to live spiritual life. It is fear that causes all problems and difficulties. It is fear that causes you depression. It is fear that makes you lose your balance. It is fear that makes you behave erratically. So, always feel you are ever pure, ever strong, ever joyful. That way you should always feel inwardly, trying to go deeper and deeper into the layers of your heart. Going inward deeply, that is renunciation. You're not satisfied with anything else. The more you come close to God, close to that divine power, the more you feel joy and peaceful. But everything is done only through strict disciplined life. Not saying one thing, doing another thing. You may convince the people by your external behavior, but can you convince yourself? That's why in spiritual life, what is very important is you have to be honest to the core. Honest to yourself. That's the point. So, let us follow what Sri Ramakrishna has said. Discrimination and renunciation. That's the way to purify our heart from the impurities of the world. That's the way to practice detachment. That's the way to go towards God. Page 514. Sri Ramakrishna said, you see how many opinions there are about God? Each opinion is a path. There are innumerable opinions and innumerable paths leading to God. Bhavanath asked, then what should we do? Master said, stick on to one path with all your strength. A man can reach the roof of a house by stone stairs, or a ladder, or a rope ladder, or a rope, or even by a bamboo pole. But he can't reach the roof if he sets foot now on one and now on another. He should firmly follow one path. Likewise, in order to realize God, a man must follow one path with all his strength. But you must regard other views as so many paths leading to God. You shouldn't feel that your path is the only right path and that other paths are wrong. You must not bear malice towards others. Well, to what path do I belong? Keshav Sen used to say to me, you belong to our path. You are gradually accepting the ideal of the formless God. Shashadhar says that I belong to his path. Vijaya too says that I belong to his, Vijaya's path. Sri Ramakrishna walked toward the Panchavati with Yam and a few other devotees. It was midday and time for the flood tide in the Ganges. They waited in the Panchavati to see the bore of the tide. Master said to the devotees, the ebb tide and flood tide are indeed amazing. But notice one thing. Near the sea, you see ebb tide and flood tide in a river. But far away from the sea, the river flows in one direction only. What does this mean? Try to apply its significance to your spiritual life. Those who live very near God feel within them the currents of bhakti, bhava and the like. In the case of a few, the Ishwar Kotis, for instance, one sees even Mahabhava and Prema. To Yam, Sri Ramakrishna asked, what is the explanation of the ebb tide and flood tide? Yam answered, according to Western astronomy, they are due to the attraction of the sun and the moon. In order to explain it, Yam drew figures on the earths and began to show the master the movement of the earth, the sun and the moon. The master looked at the figures for a minute and said, stop please, it gives me a headache. Presently, the tide came up the Ganges. They heard the sound of the rushing water. The tide struck the bank of the river and flowed toward the north. Sri Ramakrishna looked at it intently and exclaimed like a child, look at that boat. I wonder what is going to happen to it. The master and Yam sat down for a while in the Panchavati, Sri Ramakrishna placing his umbrella on the cement platform. The conversation turned to Narayan. The boy was a student. Sri Ramakrishna looked upon him as Narayan, God himself, and was very fond of him. Master asked, have you noticed Narayan's nature? He can mix with all, old and young. One cannot do this without a special power. Besides, all love him. Is he really artless? Yam said, I think so, Master. I understand that he goes to your place. Is that so? Yam said, yes, sir. He has visited me once or twice. Master said, will you give me a rupee or shall I ask Kali about it? Yam answered, very well, sir. I shall give him the money. Master said, that's fine. It's good to help those who yearn for God. Thus one makes good use of one's money. What will you gain by spending everything on your family? Kishori had several children. His salary was too small to support his family. Sri Ramakrishna said to him, Naran said he would get a job for Kishori. Please remind him of it. The master walked away in the direction of the pine grove. Returning to the Panchavati, he said to him, "Please ask someone to spread a mat outside my room. I shall lie down a few minutes. I am coming presently." When the master returned to his room, he could not find his umbrella and exclaimed, "We have all forgotten the umbrella." The busybody doesn't see a thing even when it is very near him. A man went to a friend's house to light the charcoal for his smoke, though all the time he had a lighted lantern in his hand. Another man looked everywhere for his towel. Finally he discovered that it had been on his shoulder all the time. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The master ate the prasad from the Kali temple. Then he wanted to rest a while, but the devotees were still sitting in his room. They were asked to go out, and then the master lay down. He said to Babaram, "Come here, sit near me." Babaram answered, "I am preparing betel leaf." The master said, "Put your betel leaf aside." The devotees sat under the bakul tree in the Panchavati. Tarak, who had just returned from Vrindavan, told them stories of his visit. We shall stop here. So, if you want results in spiritual life, you have to make up your mind to be disciplined in your life. And you must follow discrimination and renunciation. Stop giving any more reasons. You have to ask yourself whether you are going in a proper way or not. Vedanta applies to everyone. Coming to Vedanta means coming to your own true self. So the life of Vedanta means the life of renunciation. That means you will be always one with God. That's the way how we should conduct ourselves in this world. Though you are in this world, you have to conduct yourself skillfully. Skillfully. That's the point. Yogaha karmasu kaushalam. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you have to be skilled while you are moving in this world. So one has to struggle oneself. It's only through struggling one gets the result. You can't get the result by miracle. Suppose you get the result, you won't believe it. So what does it mean? That means you have to purify your heart. Then only you will understand. Otherwise, you think it's a magic. So purity of heart, purity, purity, purity. Concentrate on the quality of purity, how far you are pure. That's important. Then only you can come near purity itself. Otherwise you can't come near Him. God is the embodiment of purity. So, all these spiritual instructions are meant for the purification of the heart. Heart has become impure on account of attachment to things of the world, on account of ignorance. So detachment is a way to practice purity. You have to undo what all you had done before. Undoing the things. That is the process of renunciation. Wherever you are, you have to practice renunciation if you want to have the vision of God. If you want to be firmly convinced about the reality, if you want to experience peace and joy, you have to follow this method of detachment. Coming close to God. Detachment brings you close to God. Attachment takes you far away from God. Any question? Yeah. Vedanta. It's very, very sublime subject. Vedanta doesn't apply to any particular religion. It applies to your own true self. Just now I told you the Mahavakyas, Tattvamasi, you are that, Aham Brahmasmi, I am that Brahman. So you're not going somewhere to find religion. All religion is within your own heart. You have to discover it there. Discovery. Discovering the truth in your heart. That's the point. Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. The other day I was hearing a minister on TV. He was, I think, evangelist or something like that. And he believed that everybody is a sinner. And of course, then when they turn to God, they purify themselves. This was their belief. But Vedanta doesn't believe that, do they?
Vedanta will never say that you are the sinner. The sinning, the act of committing sin, etc., it is at the lower level. But the Atman, the indwelling spirit in you, is not at all a sinner. You are committing sin on account of your identification with the mind. As long as you are identified with the mind, you are bound to commit sins. As long as you are occupied with desires, invariably you commit sins because you want to satisfy your desires. Some people may come on your way, you become angry, you want to enjoy more, so you enter into all sorts of crimes. It's a vicious circle. So, if you constantly think you are the body, you are the mind, you are sinner, you are this, you are that, as long as you think that way, there is no liberation for you. You have to retreat, you have to withdraw your thinking in that line. You should not think in that fashion anymore. No, I am no more a sinner. As I said now, you have to detach yourself from body and mind. You are not the body, you are not the mind. You are the true self. That is the reality. That you have to realize it, you have to experience it. To experience it, you have to follow discipline. You have to uproot yourself from the world and get yourself rooted in spiritual ideas. Then grow spiritually. That's the way. Arla has any question?